What is up guys, Andy Forrest Steam Runner here and welcome back to another video, and today we're talking about avoiding these 5 mistakes on marathon race day. So as someone who's run 7 marathons and I'm now preparing for my 8th marathon this October, I'm excited to share with you guys some mistakes that you guys can avoid, especially the newer runners out there. I, in my opinion, have successfully ran 2 marathons, and although I've completed all 7 that I started, I really haven't done well in a lot of them. These experiences have helped me put this video together, and I want to share with you some things that you guys can avoid on your marathon race day. So if you're excited for the video, make sure you give it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel for weekly running content, and let's kick start. So the first mistake that you guys can avoid that I've fallen foul of before is to do a bit of meal prep ready for your marathon, and this particularly applies to those of you who are traveling to a marathon and might have to stay in a hotel the night before. Naturally, especially at these big events, lots of restaurants are booked out, and actually what we can sometimes find is we eat differently on the day before, maybe put a lot of food in from a restaurant that might contain a little bit more oil, a little stuff that we're not used to, and that can play havoc with our guts. What I have done in the past is exactly that, and I've fallen foul of that on race day. So my recommendation to you guys is to do a little bit of meal prep. As I said, eat what you would normally eat at home. For me, going to London this year, I'm going to be packing myself a lunch, packing myself a dinner, packing myself snacks that I would normally take, and enough fluid and hydration for me to see me through until marathon race morning. Oh, and of course, my usual marathon breakfast. I highly recommend you guys do that as well. Obviously, if your stomach is a little bit more solid than mine, because mine is not good in the slightest, then you might be fine. But for those of you who are out there, first timers, or maybe have not had to travel to a marathon before, this might be a really good thing to consider. And the second thing I want to say is make sure you train in the kit that you're going to wear on race day, because at the end of the day, we need to be comfortable in what we are wearing. I have rocked up to a race before, worn new kit, and had massive chafing issues on the marathon, and it has been an absolute nightmare. You know the saying, don't try anything new on race day? Well, I did, and I really fell foul of it. And sometimes we just think to ourselves, oh, it's only a new t-shirt, it's only a new vest, it's only new shorts. Mine, in my case, was shorts, and I have to say, it was an absolute nightmare. Don't do it. Practice in your race kit during training. Set aside 2 or 3 long runs in particular for you guys to go out in your race kit, and make sure you're comfortable in it. Make sure you're happy with it, and make sure you know that it all feels good, whether that's testing out your vest, your shorts, your socks, and in particular your belt. Make sure your belt's not too tight, because again, I've fallen foul of that before, and that can really constrict up against your guts and cause havoc as well. So make sure you're comfortable with everything you're wearing in training. Don't tinker with it on race day. Don't just think, oh, it's only a vest, I'll be all right. Because I promise you, those nipples or the inside of your legs won't thank you. And following on very closely from point number 2 is also practice your fueling in training, because I do not want you guys to be using anything new on race day. This is a massive mistake that a lot of people fall foul of. Or if your race is providing a certain brand of hydration throughout the course and you think you're going to use the gels and the fluids on the course, then test those in training as well. I have again fallen foul of this. I remember a marathon that was providing Lucozade Sport, and I just thought to myself, do you know what? I'll just have some Lucozade Sport. I'd never used it during training. I've never used it during running ever. I had some Lucozade Sport, and it was the worst thing that I could have done for my stomach. Now, a lot of people use Lucozade Sport. They think it's great. For me, it did not sit well in my stomach at all, and it was an absolute nightmare. But it's so easy to do, because when we're out there, sometimes when we get tired, our judgment is clouded slightly. Mental clarity is such an important thing during a marathon, and we have more mental clarity when we practice with what we're going to use in training. So I know right now, 11 weeks out from London Marathon, what my fueling strategy is going to be and what gels and things I'm going to be using. I'm mixing between 2 gels, and I'm going to be trying out some strategies over the coming weeks. That means I don't have to rely on the course to provide me with hydration or fluid. That means that I know I'm going to be wearing my belt or my shorts, and it's going to carry what I need to carry in. So definitely don't try any new fluids or nutrition on race day, during the race in particular, because you might fall foul of that as well. Now here's something a lot of people don't talk about too much, but I feel this more applies to more experienced runners. So if you're a beginner, just bear with me on this one. I need to share this, and maybe if you are a beginner, bank this in your mind for when you've run a few marathons. But you've all heard the cliche saying of marathon starts at mile 20. And it's true, it's right. I do agree that that is when things get tough. If we've been fueling well and we paced it right, we can get through to the end, and it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be hard, but we can end up feeling good. I've done it twice. I understand the benefits of that. However, what a lot of people don't say is be careful around halfway. Let me dive a little bit deeper on this one. So a lot of the trap that a lot of people fall into is going out too hard. Done it, been there, put my hands up to that, hence why I'm sharing this tip. But a lot of us can be quite conservative at the start, which is a great thing to do. And what that means is we get through halfway feeling really, really good. Now here's the kicker. We often then, and I've done this in one marathon, and again, I've learnt my lesson, is that I've kicked on too soon. I thought to myself, I've run a half in this time, I feel good, I'm going to now start working a little bit harder. And my golden rule of the 2 races that I've run well is that I kick on around mile 18 to 20 to 22 in that 6 mile period, depending on how I feel. That's where I've had the most success. So kicking on too early can still have a devastating effect towards the end. As I said, been there, done it. So obviously if you go out too hard, that's something that a lot of us can experience. A lot of us can put our hands up to, and we can all share those stories in the comments below. And I definitely love to hear how bad one of your marathons was when you guys have kicked on too early, because it's just such a common thing that happens. But so for those of us that think, yes, do you know what? I've been really sensible. I've held back in the first 10K. I've started to get into the groove. I'm feeling good. Do you know what? Let's go for it. Let's see what we've got. And that's when things can come undone around the halfway mark. I've seen and heard people talk about it a little bit even earlier, around mile 10 to 12. And then what happens is, again, around mile 22, 23, they just fall off the wagon and the last 3 miles. Again, been there, done it. So my tip here is not only to not go too fast in the beginning, but if you're just kind of feeling out the marathon and you're relatively new to the distance, do your best to continually hold back right up until mile 20, 22. And then if you have some in the bank, feel free to kick on. And the last and final point is one I really want you guys to listen to, because this throws a lot of people, including me. 6 of the 7 marathons, I've fallen foul of this. Even on one of the ones that I did well, I did fade in the last couple of miles. Despite getting the time that I wanted, I did come a cropper of this. So if you've been training by pace during your training block, don't worry that your pace feels a little bit harder on race day. And if you've been training by heart rate, don't worry that your heart rate is slightly slower in terms of pace. What I'm trying to say is the effort on race day might feel a little bit tougher. Why is that? I hear you ask. Well, it is because, and this is something that I experience a lot, and I know the majority of you guys will as well, nerves and adrenaline kick in. So for me on race day, my heart rate is usually 7 to 10 beats a minute higher when I start than normal. And I can guarantee you through race day, my heart rate will be higher. So if I've been training by heart rate, as a classic example, during training, I know in this training block right now, I want to be training my marathon heart rate in the 150s, because I can race a marathon in the low to mid to late 160s, starting in the lows and finishing in the lates and even creeping into the 170s. But I know that if I was training by heart rate, which I'm not training by pace, but if I was training by heart rate and I was training around the low 160s now, I guarantee you the second I hit race day, that pace that I'm training at for that heart rate will be 7 to 10 beats a minute higher. Then factor in potential weather, potential wind, other factors that might make our heart rate go higher again, and we could be talking 10 to 12 to 13 beats a minute higher. Now this applies to most people, not all. Some people are very good at suppressing adrenaline and nerves. They're very good, but for me, I'm not, and I know a lot of people aren't as well. So I'm adapting that into training by trying to make sure that my marathon goal pace, which is 6 minutes per mile, I end up hitting in the 150s, mid 150s, so that gives me scope on race day to run in the 160s. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're training at a certain pace, you might find on race day you just have to dial it back a little bit. Same with heart rate. You might find your pace is a little bit slower. So to combat that, if you want to work in training and bring your heart rate or pace back down a little bit so the effort's a bit easier, then come race day, you know you've been working at that pace, you can go out at that pace, and you've got that bit of a buffer there in terms of your heart rate, allowing it to go a little bit higher. So there we go, those are my 5 mistakes to avoid during your first marathon, third marathon, 10th marathon, however many marathons you've run. those mistakes I've come across of a lot, and I've compiled those based on my experiences. But of course, I'd love to ask you guys the mistakes that you would recommend avoiding on race day and how to combat them in the description below. As I mentioned earlier at the end of point 4, talking about horror stories, I know we've all been there. I want to encourage people to have really positive experiences, and hopefully by sharing these things we can help some people avoid some of those. If you've got any tips, please do leave them down in the comments below. It'd be great to hear from you, and yeah, let's see what mistakes you guys have made and want to pass on to help other people avoid them. If you enjoyed today's video, guys, make sure you give it a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel for weekly running content, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Until then.